You've probably seen people on LinkedIn posting about perfect prompt formulas or magic cheat codes for ChatGPT. I want to be clear, there is no magic formula. The best research on this is pretty consistent. There's no single prompting method that always wins. What actually works is providing relevant context for the specific task you need done. But that raises a question. What context should you include? How do you make sure you haven't forgotten something important? And the honest answer is, it depends. A quick internal email probably needs less context than a client-facing strategy document. The more specific your output needs to be, the more specific your input should be. This is why prompting frameworks exist. They're not formulas, they're not cheat codes. They're just mental checklists. Ways to make sure that you've given the AI all the context it needs to actually help you get the outcome you want. We're going to look at two. One for your everyday tasks and one for more complex tasks. So what actually makes a good prompt? Let's build one. Say your manager sends you an email about an upcoming product launch, and you need to turn it into a brief. Your first instinct might be to paste in the email and say, write a product launch brief based on this. It's not terrible. You've given it something to work with, but it's really vague. ChatGPT won't know who the brief is for, how long it should be, what format you need, or what tone is appropriate. It's going to guess, and you'll probably get something generic. So here's a challenge. Pause here for a moment and think to yourself, how would you improve this prompt? What's missing? Think of 2 or 3 things you might add. Okay, let's see how you did by going through this framework. So it's your job to fill in the gaps. And you can do that by thinking about 3 questions. First, who should the AI be, or what's its role? Different roles bring different expertise. A senior marketing manager will think differently to a junior copywriter. So we might say, act as a senior marketing manager. Second, what's the task? Or what specifically do you need? Not just a brief. What kind? For who? How long? Now you might add, write a 1-page product launch brief targeting small business owners. Third, what format do you need? Or what should the output look like? If you don't specify the format, the AI will have to guess. Format it as bullet points with headers for objective, audience, key messages, and channels. So putting this all together, we have act as a senior marketing manager. Using the email below, write a 1-page product launch brief targeting small business owners. Format as bullet points with headers for objective, audience, key messages, and channels. The output from this will obviously be far more aligned with what you actually wanted because you told it what you wanted. So that's our first framework: role, task, and format. Some people call this RTF. The acronym itself doesn't matter. The thinking does. And it should start to feel really natural once you get used to breaking down your tasks more intentionally. Before we move on, try this yourself on a task you've done recently. Go into ChatGPT and look at one of your prompts from a previous chat, and try applying this framework and see how the output changes. And remember to ask yourself the 3 questions for role, task, and format. For everyday tasks, the RTF framework is usually enough. But sometimes you're working on something higher stakes or more complex, something client-facing or executive level, something where close enough isn't good enough. In those cases, 3 questions might not fully capture the nuance of your task. This leads us to a more complex framework known as COSTAR: context, objective, style, tone, audience, and response. Let's look at COSTAR in action with a fairly high-stakes scenario. Imagine you've just come out of 3 stakeholder meetings about an upcoming website project. Your job is to turn those messy meeting notes into a project brief that everyone can align on. Using RTF, you might write something like, act as a senior project manager. Using the meeting notes below, write a 2-page project brief with sections for objectives, scope, timeline, and risks. That's actually a solid prompt. You've got a role, a clear task, and a specific format. For a lot of tasks, that would be enough. But for something like this, ChatGPT still doesn't know a lot of context that might be really relevant for this task. For example, maybe that there's a disagreement between stakeholders about scope, or that the deadline is fixed and non-negotiable. So you'll probably get a nicely formatted brief, but it might miss the point. It will summarize the meetings without resolving the tension or making the constraints clear. This is where CoStar can help us think more deeply about what we need to specify. First, context. What's the background? You might say, these are notes from 3 different stakeholder meetings. There's a disagreement about scope. Marketing wants a full rebrand, but the budget only covers a website refresh. The deadline is fixed because of a product launch in October. Then, objective. What are you trying to achieve? Here we might say, create alignment. This brief needs to get everyone on the same page about what's actually happening and get sign-off on scope. Then we can think about style. How should it read? Here we might say, clear and structured. No ambiguity about what's in or out of scope. Next, we have tone. What's the emotional register? We might say neutral and diplomatic. Don't take sides on scope disagreements, but make the constraints obvious. Then we think about audience. Who exactly is reading this? We might say the project sponsor and key stakeholders. They'll use this to sign off. Finally, we have the response format. What do we actually need? Here we might say a 2-page brief with sections for objectives, scope, timeline, and key risks. If we put it all together, your prompt might look something like this. Using the meeting notes below, write a project brief. Some context. There's a disagreement about scope. Marketing wants a full rebrand, but the budget only covers a website refresh. The deadline is fixed because of a product launch in October. The goal is to create alignment and get sign-off, so make it clear what's in scope and what's not. Keep the tone neutral. Don't take sides, but make the constraints obvious. The audience is the project sponsor and key stakeholders. Format it as a 2-page brief with sections for objectives, scope, timelines, and key risks. When you feed that into GPT, it's obvious that you won't get a generic summary of the meetings. You'll get a brief that acknowledges the tension, makes the boundaries clear, and helps people move forward. Think of a task you're working on that has some complexity to it. Maybe there's a specific audience you need to consider with some constraints you're working within, or a particular outcome you're trying to achieve. Or take the task you used earlier for RTF and see if there's more you can add. Go through each element of CoStar. Pause the video here and do that now. Then see how the output compares to what you'd get from a simpler brief. So there are a couple of frameworks to think about. Obviously, this isn't a one-size-fits-all. Going through CoStar for every prompt could mean spending more time on prompting than doing the work. Here's something that surprises a lot of people. Really good prompts can be long. Sometimes a paragraph, sometimes a page, and they can take 10 or 20 minutes or even longer to craft. That might feel inefficient, but think about what you're getting in return. A well-crafted prompt for a task you do regularly, or a complex task, can generate output that's usable immediately, without any adjustments. Multiply that across dozens of uses, and a 30-minute investment starts to look quite reasonable. On the other hand, if you're just asking a quick question or doing a one-off task, a simple prompt is probably fine. So match the effort to the stakes. If your task is substantial enough, then invest the time into the prompt. And there's an interesting bonus. You've probably found that the process of writing a good prompt often helps you think through the task itself. When you're forced to articulate the context, the objective, the audience, and the constraints, you're actually breaking down the problem for yourself. So even if the AI doesn't nail it on the first try, that clarity doesn't go to waste. There are 2 final things you can do to get even more out of your prompts. Firstly, you can tell it what not to do. So far, we're focused on telling the AI what you want, but sometimes what you don't want matters just as much. For example, ChatGPT tends to overuse certain phrases or punctuation that make content sound obviously AI generated. So you could tell it, do not use em dashes. Or maybe you want its response to say focused and not pad out the response. You could say, don't include background context, just give me the recommendation. Or maybe you're writing for a non-technical audience. You could say something like, avoid jargon. If a technical term is necessary, explain it simply. Think about what would make the output unusable, and you can rule it out from the start. Finally, you can give ChatGPT permission to be uncertain. Remember, the AI wants to please you. Sometimes it wants to please you so much that it will guess an answer rather than admitting it doesn't know. Funnily enough, a way to help fix this is to give it permission to be uncertain. So you might add this line to your prompts. If you are not sure about the answer, tell me you don't know, or ask clarifying questions. do not guess. This doesn't entirely eliminate the risk, but it does reduce the chances that ChatGPT will make things up. So that's it. A few frameworks and concepts to help you prompt effectively. Remember, these aren't magic formulas. You don't have to follow them rigidly every time. They're just mental checklists, ways to make sure you haven't missed something important. And the question is always the same. Have I given this bright, eager, and capable colleague everything they need to actually help me?